Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Kageyama, and I'd like to welcome everyone here to the Cancer Conquering Community. And I'm a stage 4 prostate, bone, and lung cancer patient slash survivor, enjoying this beautiful summer weather we have here in Texas. And I'm hearing uh, a lot of the same reports from people all over the country. It's been a wonderful summer here, very moderate. We've only had a couple days, 2 or 3 days at the most, of over 100 for our area. That is rare. So we're enjoying it and soaking it up. We have a very, very special guest here today, and her name is Teona Ducre, another person with an incredible name, but even more so, she has an unbelievable story. So, what I'd like to do is introduce Teona, and please tell us who you are and tell us about your journey, and let's have a great conversation.
Hey, Mark, thank you so much for having me on today. This is super exciting. It's always a treat to be in a community of thrivers, I love the name of your group, Cancer Conquering Community. That is just remarkable because that is the reminder for hope in something that can always seem hopeless. So I just want to say that to start. Thank you for inviting me today. But you already said my name. My name's Teona Ducre. And I am an almost 10-year pancreatic cancer survivor. 2026 will mark 10 years from diagnosis and 10 years from being in remission. So both of those things will be happening during the next year. Um, I reside in Atlanta. However, I'm traveling right now. So I'm in the beautiful state of New Mexico, visiting my adult kids in Albuquerque. Um, and I am a physician recruiter. So one of the things that I did after I was diagnosed, I decided that I wanted to reinvent myself. And because I happen to be quite passionate about health education and health equity and all of those things that kind of came as a result of my diagnosis and journey with cancer, I decided to do a complete career change. And now I am a physician recruiter for Pinnacle Health, also based out of Atlanta. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much, Tiona. Uh, let's talk about your story and how you get what led up to your diagnosis, and let's get into that because this is it's really, really good.
Yeah. Mark, you and I have talked a lot over the last couple of months. You know that my diagnosis happened on what used to be a fun day, but is not so much anymore. April Fool's Day, April 1st of 2016. I got a very disheartening call that was basically prompting me to go in and seek medical treatment around a very large I like to call it was like a UFO. It was like an unidentified object that was found on my pancreas. No explanation. It was somewhere in the realm of 7 centimeters or so, and it was just this big old mess on my pancreas, and they didn't know what it was. But in that phone call that day, the doctor did tell me, she said, "Hey, listen, this is urgent. You need to get to a doctor. Our little uh, having me come in for what they thought was an ulcer because I was having stomach pains and fever and just things that quote unquote were acting like an ulcer turned out to not be an ulcer. It turned out to be a very large tumor, in fact, and that was malignant, and it was on my pancreas. And from April 1st of 2016 for the next year, that started this wild ride that I know everybody knows and understands on within this community, the journey that we know is cancer. And I was diagnosed with stage 3 adenocarcinoma and operable pancreatic cancer. And that began a very different life, not just for me, but for me and everybody that was in my circle, my family, my children, my friends. We joined the wild ride of cancer. And here I am almost 10 years later, still trucking along.
It's awesome. We're so happy that you
Oh.
are still here. Uh,
Me too.
I think we could all
Thank God.
say that, no matter
Yeah.
what. Anyway, talk about you know, your family, your diagnosis, and how everybody came together with your situation?
Yeah. So Mark, a little bit of background on me. At the time, I was 41 years old. I had two children, single mom. My kids were teenager, preteen, 13 and 15 at the time. My son was living with me in Atlanta, and my daughter was actually in Albuquerque with her dad. And um, our lives drastically changed with one phone call. And I was teaching, I was on spring break. Um, kind of funny backstory. I was actually on spring break, getting ready to have a really fun week after, what I felt like. By the time a teacher gets to spring break, we're going, I have worked so hard and I deserve a break. I did not get a break. What I got was chemo. So there's that. But our family at the time, was really just me and my kids. And we'd moved away from New Mexico and found ourselves in Atlanta, Georgia. And one of the most remarkable things is I learned that community can make a world of difference in every situation. Um, Even though we were not from Atlanta, did not know anybody there. I took a teaching job there, so I knew like the people that I was working with, and my children knew the people from their school. Namely, my son, he knew or had his football teammates, the parents, all of the kids on the football team at his high school, Centennial High School in Roswell, Georgia. And what came along with my cancer diagnosis was an opportunity to build community. And even though my cancer diagnosis was kind of the setting event that caused a whole community to get together, what we found was that we had so many friends that we didn't even know that we had. Um, Mark, you and I talked about this, but my son being a football player uh, really was a huge impact for us because not only did he have community through the boys and the coaches and the parents, that trickled down to me. And that looked like 15-year-old boys, football players coming to cut my grass. And one of the stories that I love to tell is that the football team did a fundraiser for pancreatic cancer that year. And my son orchestrated the whole things, but he managed to get the entire team on board with wearing purple socks to the game or headbands or whatever they were wearing in honor of pancreatic cancer. And I think that when that event happened, it was beautiful to look out into the crowd, seeing so many people wear purple, seeing so many people come together, making donations, just loving each other and loving me. And that was one of the experiences that happened when I had cancer, was seeing people come together to help me. Because in my head, I was like, I'm just, I'm just moving along in my life. And I didn't really know up until then how valuable it is when people come together, because that helped me survive and that helped my son survive too. Because as we all know, cancer it's a family affair. It's like it's not just the person that gets diagnosed. It is everybody gets cancer at that point because everybody is living in a flood of tests and appointments and chemo side effects and surgery and all of those things that happen. It really happens to the family. And I really value the fact that people who weren't related to me by blood, in addition to my own family, came together in our community to support us. And it was just a remarkable experience despite all the things that were going on.
That is amazing. Absolutely amazing. And you have an amazing son. Talk more about that and what you've learned about him and what he's learned about you.
Yeah, it's funny. My son and I were out to dinner last night, and now my son, so that 15-year-old is now almost 25. He's turning 25 in a couple of months. So it's, been almost a decade. And I think one of the things that I learned was that how compassionate and empathetic we all think teenagers or children, but especially teenagers, a lot of times we think, oh, they're so narcissistic, they only care about themselves. And I found that to not be true, not only in my son and my daughter, but like in their friend group as well. And I was a teacher at the time, and I was teaching middle school, high school at the time, so I got to be around a lot of young people, and I kind of think that helped me survive too. But my son, I learned how delicate life is. for everybody, but especially for teens. I think they feel big, and we don't see that a lot of times, especially as parents, because we're so caught up in like, okay, you just got to get your homework done and do this and do that. But I saw how deeply my child felt, not just for me, but like he would go to chemo with me on occasion, and I would see how compassionate he was towards other people, like that were there in the infusion center. Like he would point out, oh, that guy's here by himself, and it would like make him sad. He would say, that's really sad. I wonder where his or her family is. There was a gentleman that I'm thinking of in particular, but he was like, I wonder where his family is. And, should we do something for this guy? Those were the types of things that my son was thinking about at 15 when we think they're so absorbed in themselves. And I think part of it was already within him, but having his mom have cancer and potentially, pancreatic cancer is terminal, it's fatal a lot of times. So I think he was reconciling the fact that he is so young, but he had to step up into a very adult role as a caregiver because it was just the two of us in the house. And I think that some of what I learned about him was how far his compassion could stretch. And it wasn't just relegated to me. One of the things he did, it was actually on the day that I was getting out of the hospital. He did a fundraiser because we had to use a food bank. We all know teachers don't make a lot of money and all that. And there came a point in time where I wasn't able to work full time anymore. And we were actually using a food bank to get groceries and things like that. And he remembered that food bank. So later on that year, when Thanksgiving came up, which was about the time I was having surgery, he organized a football tournament, a 7-on-7 football tournament with, his little group of friends from the football team, but it ended up getting really big. He did this for like 5 or 6 years, even after that. But everything that he raised in that went back to the food bank. And the admission, if you will, fee to play on a team in this 7-on-7 tournament was you had to raise canned goods. So your team, and he kind of made it a little competition, the team that raises the most canned foods or, non-perishable items got a gift card or whatever. But it was amazing to watch him draw the community in and getting gift cards from Chick-fil-A and water donated and things to put on this event that was everything was donated back to the food bank where we went. So it was a growing experience, I think, for him on multiple levels that went outside of just me.
Wow. I hadn't heard that, so that's
Amazing.
phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. Uh, Talk about I always see in a lot of your pictures the color purple. And so in fact, you just mentioned that purple represents pancreatic cancer. I think you fit very well with purple. Is that one of your favorite colors now, or talk about that?
So I'm glad you brought that up, Mark. It's really funny. I used to wear purple all the time because it did represent pancreatic cancer. And my mom, even this was more recently, she gave me a luggage set because I do a lot of travel. I travel all the time. And she bought me a matching luggage set that is purple. And purple is a hard color because I didn't like it. Oddly enough, I'm more of a pink girl. I like pink and I like blue. And you guys are all wearing blue today. That's like actually my favorite color. So I wore it as a symbol. But one of the things that I do want to talk about today is there's life after cancer. And I started getting away from wearing purple because I didn't want my life just to be reflected in my cancer journey and diagnosis. It's always with me, it's always a part of me. But I stopped wearing purple because it also represented a time of my life that, for all the wonderful things that happened, was incredibly difficult. And now, 10 years out, I'm actually wanting to really structure my life in a way that I'm not just the, poster girl for pancreatic cancer survival. That's great, but I'm a lot of other things too. I think my only affinity to purple before this, ironically enough, is I am, everybody says this, but I think I am truly the world's biggest Prince fan. And I know a lot of people love Prince and they go, oh, no, I am. And it just so happened the day that I got the diagnosis was crazy enough the same day that Prince died. And of course, we all know Prince in purple. So, if anything, when I was wearing a lot of purple too, I was kind of like, sidebar thinking about my affinity and my affection for my all-time favorite artist, the great Prince. So that's what I'll say about purple.
Wow. That that's a
Wow.
great explanation. I mean, that's the beauty of actually talking to people. And no matter how many times you talk to them, there's always something more that you can gather and you could learn. I had never heard that, so I'm glad I asked that question. That's a fascinating thing to hear.
Yeah.
We're going to get a little later on, we're going to get into a topic that we had discussed in part three. I think it's a really, really important topic. But before we get there, let's talk more about your journey itself and what you went through. So you got the diagnosis, and one of the things you talked about when you got it in our interviews is the fact that you didn't have time to deal with cancer.
Yeah.
And so talk about how cancer can abruptly come into your life, and it's something you have to deal with. You can't just set it aside. And Carrie knows this. Carrie Reed knows this very well. Uh, you have to deal with it. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I wish that there was a way that we could take cancer, put in a little bottle, and put it on the shelf and say, I'm going to deal with you when I get the time. And to your point, Mark, we don't get to do that. Your life, everybody's life that gets a cancer diagnosis, it comes to a screeching halt. And I think at the time I was zooming along in my life like I owned a Ferrari. I was just doing my life and things. And when I got that diagnosis, everything came to a very abrupt halt. But it wasn't just in my life, it was everybody around me too. It's like time kind of stopped for a minute. But the reality was is that life is going on around you. And I think that's one of the things I learned very quickly was that everything still has to be done, even though you may have cancer and you're feeling like crap. Chemo's kicking in and the side effects and stuff, and the fears that you have as somebody walking through life with cancer. All of those things can be very overwhelming, but dishes still have to be washed. Dinners still have to be cooked. If you're working, whatever your work is still has to be done. So when I got diagnosed, um, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I was like on my way to the beach. I was getting ready to have a great time at spring break. I had a date that day. I had life, and I kind of when I got the diagnosis, when the doctor initially called, um, I my first thought was I'm quite busy. I don't have time for this right now. And I think that was like in my own way, like my arrogance and my ego saying, bah, I don't believe this is happening to me. Um, everything in me was going, okay, I felt a little sick, but I'm not like, laid out on the bed and can't move. That's what I thought cancer was. And one of the things that I saw was many, many people battling cancer. And some people are very sick and they can't get up. And I also saw people who were just making their life work, even with cancer. And I think that's one of the important things is um, modern medicine has come to a place where we we can actually live our lives. Mark, you're doing it now, you know what I mean, quite successfully and quite fully, even with the cancer diagnosis, in spite of it. And so for people who are either newly diagnosed or going through it right now, the one thing that I say is that you can actually live your life through treatment. There's lots of factors that go into that. Of course, what is your overall health now? But having cancer was not what I thought it was going to be at the beginning. It was very different. Terrible, yes, but there was also this thing
Let me
of
pause you
I'm
right there,
still me.
Teona.
Yeah, of course.
What did you think cancer was going to be? And then what did it turn out to be?
Yeah, I think I thought, well, aside from the fact that I was in denial, I was like, first of all, this isn't happening. What did they say? Denial ain't just a river, right? I was like, this is not happening. But I think I thought I was going to be bedridden. I was, I thought I was going to die very quickly at the time. The statistics for pancreatic cancer were somewhere in the neighborhood of a 7% survival rate. And that was very disheartening. And it still is. It's changed a little bit. But in my head, I thought, well, in 6 months, am I even going to be here? Um, what it turned out to be is me making choices how I was going to live my life from diagnosis day forward, whether that was 6 months, 16 years, or 40 years. And every day was a choice about how I was going to show up in the world as somebody that had cancer, but also as somebody who was still very much me. I was still very much the Teona that liked to go out and socialize and have fun. And I think of all the things when I hear people say they're fighting or they're battling, for me personally, the thing I was battling for was to be me, not just a cancer patient. I was battling for my identity as the Teona that I was on the 30th of March before April 1st came, right? That person the day before was still there. I just had to do a lot of extra work to show up that way, especially at the point when I had to, or not had to, but I chose to shave my hair, and all of those things were still within me. So I think that turned out to be the biggest difference is I wasn't laying around in bed. I was traveling with my son's football team. I was still doing my job. I was still having dinners with friends and living my life.
And that is such an important thing, living your life in spite of cancer. So many people, their life is 1,000% consumed by cancer, and all these things are going around, life is going around for them, and all they're thinking about is, the next treatment and everything like that. And so I think as a cancer patient, we have to open up our minds and realize that there's more to life than just cancer treatments. And life does not stop, as you know. Life does not, slow down just because that you're not feeling well or you're sick. Uh,
Right.
you still have to live and you still have to interact with the people around you in a way that propels you forward. And that's the thing I think is something that I think that some people miss, some people get. And, so moving forward with your life in spite of cancer is so important. I mean, I talk about that a lot, both on my YouTube channel and here on Cancer Conquering Community. But I think one of the things that really has struck me about your story is just your how supportive your family has been, and how you all came together and your son, and the people around you, and that's a beautiful thing. I had a conversation with somebody just yesterday, and I think a lot of people are not ready for this. Is the fact that the people that you thought were close in your life, some of them fall out because of cancer, and then some that you didn't expect rise, and step up, which is an amazing thing. Talk about that, how that happened with your journey.
Yeah, it's funny because, like I mentioned, we were pretty new to the Atlanta area. I never in a million years expected like random people to come by our side. The football team the coach put out a memo and he asked for my permission. He said, listen, we want to support you. And through him and the one of the booster moms who ended up being a very good friend of mine, they put out a memo to the football team and said, like, hey guys, one of our moms. It wasn't just, I just remember that. It said one of our moms, one of our kids, his mom has cancer. And we got to be knights. The mascot is the knights. And we got to power up and do our blue thing and be the knights and help this family. And I mean, I knew a lot of the parents, but I didn't know every single parent. I knew most of the boys, but it was like the response was overwhelming to the point that I think I cried like the first, few days, not because I had cancer, more because I was like, gosh, people are awesome. It was that kind of thing. I think we've talked a lot about my son. We don't talk a lot about my daughter. I have a daughter too, and she was so much younger. She wasn't so much younger, but she was younger. And I think her support came a lot later, um, because she did a documentary. She's a digital film major, and she did a documentary about. It wasn't really about cancer, but it was about me. And in that, she released this documentary about, what it was like having a mom with cancer. And it was this beautiful little mini documentary that she did, that really showed not just where I was, you know, years ago, but where I am today post cancer. I think what surprised me was how hard it was for people on the other side to accept me having cancer. And there were people, my family was outstanding. My sister, I had very young nieces at the time. I mean, like they were, like toddlers and stuff, but they would like wear purple and cheer me on and stuff. Um, so I think I had the advantage of having not just people that I didn't know join in community for this, but like my actual relatives were part of this journey with me, and people just got on board. And I will say I was very public with my diagnosis. I know many people choose to handle their diagnosis in a multitude of ways. Um, because I knew it would be hard, and more so for my son and my daughter than anybody. I really wanted the community support for them. I wanted people to rally around them more so because I knew this was going to be hard on them. And I think that happened. I will say I have seen other people that I know or have known over the years that have had a cancer diagnosis and their family completely falls apart because it's way too hard. And they don't have the support of family, um, or even friends sometimes, and that is just heartbreaking to me. I understand that a cancer diagnosis is so hard for everybody, and everybody can't show up the same way. I think I try to just remain grateful for the people who did show up because they showed up big. And I'm still to this day thanking people who sent treat boxes to me and like crocheted blankets. And it seemed like every day in the mail, like I was receiving something even from people that I didn't know. And I'm eternally grateful for that.
Oh, that is phenomenal. Um, I think one of the things that you've you were diagnosed about 10 years ago. Your 10-year anniversary is coming up. What changes have you seen in the cancer world from then till now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. I think I've seen a lot because I've been so involved at the level with a lot of different organizations, PanCan being one of them, the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, Purple Pansies locally in Atlanta, Cinemagoids. I mean, there's so many organizations, but I've had the privilege of, sitting at some tables where I'm hearing them talk about clinical trials or having access to some of the best doctors out there in the field for pancreatic cancer. And I think the biggest advances have been made as a result of clinical trials. I know that one of the things that I really talked about over the course of, my journey in advocacy is really talking about seeing clinical trials. And I'm not a doctor, of course, I don't have an MD. I know very little about biology, but what I do know is that in the space of treatment options, there's many more treatment options now, at least for pancreatic cancer, than there were when I got diagnosed. What lent itself to the lower diagnose or the lower rates of survival in pancreatic cancer was there was just a lack of interest sometimes in that cancer, because while a number of people did not survive beyond 5 years, there also wasn't this huge diagnosis rate. I think it was like 55,000 people the year I got diagnosed. So there wasn't always interest in pursuing treatment or clinical trials. And that is one of the things I've seen change in the last decade. And that comes thanks to the blood, sweat, and hard work of a lot of people who have advocated for their loved ones, for their family members to say, hey, we've really got to get funding to fuel research. We've got to let researchers and scientists know that this is out there so they do take an interest. And one of the things that I had done early on in my diagnosis was I started doing a lot of speaking and a lot of advocacy around just awareness. People, I didn't know what pancreatic cancer was when my doctor called me and on April 1st and said, "Hey, it's on your pancreas," I literally was like, I need a Google search right now. Where's the pancreas? What does it do? And why is there something growing on it that's not supposed to be there? I didn't know anything about pancreatic cancer except that Steve Jobs had more recently had just passed, and his diagnosis wasn't real mainstream until unfortunately after he passed. And I think that was a family decision that they made. Completely respect that. I just didn't know a lot about pancreatic cancer until after I got it. Now I hear it in the news or on the media more often, because unfortunately there are the instances are going up. But I am glad in a way that they're talking about it more in mainstream settings, because when I got diagnosed, I couldn't find literally a single survivor. I was looking for somebody to talk to, and somebody sent me a TED talk, and it just so happened that the young woman that was, involved in this TED talk, she lived in Atlanta and she was a stage 4 pancreatic cancer survivor. And I couldn't find her quick enough. I did meet her subsequently, and her and I are actually friends now. But it was just the idea that nobody knew about pancreatic cancer, and they just assumed once you got pancreatic cancer, it was a literal death sentence. And I remember telling people cautiously that I had pancreatic cancer because I knew they were just going to assume that I was dead already. And that was kind of one of the things that my daughter said when I told her. She said, "Hey, I've read the statistics." She was like 13, and she said, "And mom," she said, it's like you've already died and we're just waiting for it to happen in real life, because the statistics say nobody survives this." And I told her very gently, I said, "Yes, this is true." And I said, "But I don't think this is everybody's going to die someday, including me and you, but this isn't how I'm going to die. I believe that there is a solution for this." And thankfully, there was a solution. And here we are almost 10 years later. My daughter and I just went out to dinner the other night and had a very lovely dinner.
Mhm.
So that was great.
What would you
Amazing.
say if you were to compare the time when you got diagnosed, compare it to now? What, how has the perception of having cancer changed from then until now, or has it?
Yeah. Um, I don't know that it's necessarily changed. I think, unfortunately, the very specific kind of cancer I had is still in the minds of people, because the when I got diagnosed, the survival rate was in single digits. It was like one of the few cancers that had a single digit survival rate. Now it's double digits, but it's only like 13%. I mean, it's doubled, but like 13% is for 5 years. That's a very low statistic, right? So I don't know that perceptions have changed, because when I still tell people, "Oh, I'm kind of nonchalant about it," and because I'm trying to move beyond the cancer diagnosis, I don't always tell people. But in the offshoot chance that I mention to somebody like, "Oh, I had cancer," they go, "What kind of cancer did you have?" "Pancreatic." And it's literally like a clutch my pearls moment, like, "Oh my God, you had pancreatic cancer. How are you still standing here?" Because people assume that once you get that diagnosis, it's all over. And the number of people that I know that have survived pancreatic cancer is amazing, because I have met over this last 10 years, I have met some of the most phenomenal people. I think you've met some of them too now, Mark.
Mhm.
And we're vibrant and we're thriving. And I think so many more of us are trying to put out the word that, hey, this doesn't have to be a death sentence. You can not only survive this, but you can thrive. And there is this other side of cancer. So I think, at least in this group, we're trying to change that. I think cancer in general, I'm trying to remember the name of the movie, but it was like one of the 80s movies. I don't know if it was St. Elmo's Fire, Pretty in Pink, one of those, where they're sitting around the table and they're talking about the neighbor. And I remember this, the mom whispers, she goes, "She's got cancer." Like it was like this real secretive thing. Like we didn't say
Mhm.
cancer out loud. And I think that's where we were years ago. And now I think people who have cancer are in the community. We are working. We're one of my friends that she's also a pancreatic cancer survivor. She jumps out of planes every single year on her. We happen to have the same diagnosis date, April 1st, every single year. And she's been doing it for like 16, 17 years. She literally goes and does a free fall jump now. It's not even a tandem jump anymore. So I think that I know she's remarkable. Uh, um, I think people are really not just hiding out the way we used to when we had cancer. When I got diagnosed with cancer, I remember saying, I'm just going to look like me and I'm not going to look like I have cancer. And I don't even know what that meant when I said it. I just knew I just didn't want to be bedridden. So every day I got up and I put on makeup and I dressed in something cute or whatever that meant for me. And that isn't the true, that's not true for everybody. Everybody doesn't feel that way, or everybody may not have that experience. It was just what I wanted because I didn't want to be defined by this, intruder in my body. So I think that most people are trying to get beyond what they think cancer is and live differently, even with the diagnosis. And I think that is important. And each individual decides what that's going to be for them.
What point did you decide to take control of your situation, your personal situation, and move forward and tailor your journey to your personality?
Yeah, I think I decided within 30 minutes, and I'm not even saying that facetiously. Um, as soon as I got past the shock that this was really happening, and I will say that took a minute because I was, my mom and I had a little bit of a back and forth, but because I wasn't even going to go do the follow up and get the scan and all of those things, I was like, oh, this is just an ulcer. I'm fine. And my mother, God bless her, she put her foot down from, you know, 1,500 miles away. And she said, no, you're going to the doctor like in the next hour. So thanks, mom, for that. But I think that as soon as I knew that it was real, one of the first things I said to myself was, I'm going to live. And part of that came from somebody reminding me that while the statistic at the time was only 7% of the people will survive 5 years, let alone it dwindled, or it was shorter before that period of time. But this friend of mine said, hey, just remember somebody makes up the other 93% of that statistic. Decide what side you want to be on. And of course, I said, I want to be in the other side of that statistic, right? I don't want to be on the side that it's 93% of people don't survive, but 7% of people do survive. Somebody makes up that number. Why not me? So that happened very quickly. And part of that, and I say this to people all the time, you have to advocate for yourself. Um, in regardless of what kind of cancer, or even just in general, when you're going to, see your primary care doctor for a checkup, I say advocate for yourself, advocate for what you want, know your body, know when your body feels different. Something might feel off. Don't be dismissive of that. And for me, thinking about where do I want to be, it was hard for me to think 10 years out, but I could think like in increments, right? In 6 months, I would write little notes to myself on my mirror. My bathroom mirror was kind of big, and I would in lipstick write notes to myself, affirmations to remind me, okay, I got to get through however 20 some odd rounds of chemo, whatever it was. I got to get through this number of rounds, but if I can just get to the one that's next Tuesday, I'm doing good. And then if I can get to this one, I'm doing better. And if I get to this one, this is like, the Super Bowl right here. If I can get there, it's like all of these are just, practices, and I'm just trying to get to the other side of this. That helped me stay focused on what I wanted, which was to see my kids grow up. And I've watched both of them graduate from college. I've watched both of them find their, at least their early careers and get into jobs. And even before that, I helped them move into their dorms and watch them graduate from high school and go to prom. I got to do all of those things. And it started with the simple goal of just trying to get to the end of the first round of chemo. So that's what I would encourage people to think about, is think about what you want on the other side of this, because there's so much more. And I keep saying it, there is so much more. Cancer does not have to be the end. Even when they tell you it's bad, it doesn't have to be the end.
We'll talk more about focus as a cancer patient. And you brought up something that I think is that really helped me personally is, taking little bites of things and accepting small improvements and things of that nature, and how, you keep giving the energy and effort to making just small improvements, and how those small improvements over time can add up to something a lot bigger.
Yeah. Um, so I think that the focus as a cancer patient, um, one focus has to be nutrition, and I believe that with my whole heart. And I know that people tackle things differently. Having a gastrointestinal type of cancer forced me to focus on my nutrition because my body just wouldn't let me eat certain things or participate in things that were not nutritionally sound for me. So little changes that I made was, when we hear it all the time, I took sugar out of my diet. Granted, I took it out because I was scared and I was reading all the statistics that said sugar is like a cancer multiplier, right? Whether that is true or not, it doesn't matter. I did it because it just seemed like good advice, right? My oncologist would tell me, do what feels right for you and listen to your body. And when I stopped eating the sugars, I just felt better. Whether it contributed to me having a better outcome with cancer, no clue. Not a scientist, not a doctor, but what I do know is I felt better, right? And if I felt better, I was going with it. um, and I think that I felt better when I walked. Like, even though I was really tired, and I think I shared the story with you, Mark, I would get out of treatment infusion center on Monday around 3:30-ish, 4 o'clock, and my son was still in football practice. And I would go out there with my little chemo bag on because I had a pump that I had to wear for 3, 4 days, something like that. And I would go and walk around the track while the boys were in football practice. And granted, they would cheer me on. They'd be like, "Go, Misty, go, you got this." And it made me feel better. So I kept doing it instead of going home and laying down. And that was a tip that I got from one of the nurses. She said, "Hey, you're going to be exhausted, but if you move your body won't like cramp up just because chemo is going to do a number on your joints and your muscles." And she said, "So if you can just move your body for a little while, no matter how tired you are, she said, I promise you're going to feel better the next day." And you know what? God bless her. She was right. So getting out there and walking, eating better. I juiced. I did take a few supplements, and I don't push a lot of supplements because that's definitely a doctor decision, but it made me feel better. I had low potassium. I was having small issues with my heart and things like that. So I was just wanting to do whatever was going to help me get out of bed the next day so I wasn't bedridden. And to this day, when I look back on that time, the running joke was I was super healthy. And my oncologist said, he's like, "You're probably one of the healthiest people I've ever met." And he said, "But you have this stupid, pesky tumor that we've got to get rid of." He says, "That's the only thing that's like wrong with you right now." But I think that doing some of those tiny little changes, and they weren't big ones, they seemed big, but they were not big. I think not only did it set me up for a better outcome, I think 10 years later, it's kept me here. So I really encourage, focus on the things that make you feel good, whatever those things are.
One of the things that my approach when I was recovering was I basically took a rehab approach like athletes do. And I've always heard over the years, you hear from athletes and people that are rehabbing from injuries, how they have to fight through the pain. And and so that is such an important thing, is to focus your mind and not let the pain overcome you in the moment. But if you keep pushing that pain marker and trying to push through it, that's how you improve. That's how you get better. That's how you feel better, is by making those small increments. And that is such an incredible thing. For instance, uh, I set out every single day to improve. When I was really sick prior to cancer, I worked out 4 to 5 times a week. I would curl like 20 to 25 pounds in each arm. And that was like something I did for decades. I did it for a long time. When I had to start back and I wanted to start using weights again, I had to use 1 pound of weights because I was so weak. I was just so incredibly weak. So in my mind, I had to overcome what I used to do and accept what I have to do today. And so, what was your approach as far as that goes?
Yeah. Remember I told you on my mirror I would write messages to myself, and there was a guy, his name's Eric Thomas. He's a big motivational speaker. And I used to put a lot of his messages up on my mirror. And one of the things he said, pain is temporary. And to this day, I remember that. Pain is temporary. And it's exactly what you're talking about. Um, so when I would be going, and we all know, chemo is like incredibly uncomfortable. It's painful. It feels terrible. And I would sit there and I would think, this is
And you're
temporary.
being nice, by the way.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny because the particular brand of chemo that I had was lovingly known as 5FU, and we all know what the FU stood for, right? 'Cause, yeah, we were like, yeah, it's terrible. But I would think, okay, this is temporary, right? And I would psych myself up like you would not believe to go into chemo, I mean, surgery, all of those things, because I have a high pain tolerance, but at the same time, I don't like discomfort. So I think it's really important that we do push ourselves. The other part of that is same guy, Eric Thomas, he kind of had this one affirmation that he would talk about is you have to want whatever it is that you want as much as you want to breathe. And I wanted to live as much as I want to breathe. And in the story that he tells about this, he talks about like a guy that goes out to the ocean and somebody's like trying to like push him underwater, and the guy's like fighting for his life because and the guy says, "What do you want?" He says, "I just want to breathe." And he would say, "That's what you have to want when there's something you really want in your life. You have to want it as bad as if like somebody were, holding you underwater, and all you want is that gasp of air." So I would remember that and I would say, I just want the gasp of air and I know it's going to come at the end of this. So it's like now, all these years later, I'm not gasping for air. I'm just breathing rather easily. And I think that came from the fight 9 years ago when the chemo was in place and the surgery was impending and everything was going wrong. I just kept saying, I want to breathe. So I think about that now.
See, I learned something new every day, and yeah, I think that's a fantastic analogy. I love that. What are you doing now as far as your advocacy?
Things like this. In November, the Atlanta Pancreas Conference is coming up, and I'll be one of the speakers on the panel there, one of the patient panelists. Um, I think sometimes now my advocacy is more subtle. It's not a lot of things that I'm doing as publicly anymore because quite honestly, like I've spent the last 9 years being really public and being on committees and boards and doing all kinds of things and stuff like that. I think now sometimes my advocacy is less about the cancer piece and more about how do we like just not get cancer to begin with. I think that's my ultimate dream and my ultimate goal. We can do all of these things to survive and thrive and fight through cancer, but the real thing that I want more advocacy around is how do we just make our lives so that our bodies are not breeding grounds for cancer to begin with. And I think that's the direction that I'm leaning more now. It's not directly talking about cancer anymore. It's about how do we live that life where we are intentional so that our bodies respond better to the environment around us. And again, not being a doctor, I have no no evidence or you know what I mean? Like I can't give you any medical context for this, but what I do know is that when we live better, our body operates better. It functions better. And however that is, if that means we're taking on less stress, um, if that means that whatever form or fashion of spirituality or faith we have, that we're putting that at the front of our lives and letting that help us through this journey that we're on, I think those things are important. And I really want to see more people not get diagnosed with cancer, not because they figured out the science, but because people figured out how we can live in our bodies more successfully.
That is fantastic. I want to bring up a subject that you and I discussed in part three of our interview series, and I think you know what I'm going to talk
Yeah.
about, uh, because I think it's really really important, and so what I want everybody to do is if you have a thought about what we're going to be talking about, just raise your hand like that. You don't have to put up the emoji hand or anything like that. Uh, just reach out and I'll see you. But one of the most important things I think we talked about was, uh, when a person gets pronounced that they're in remission or that they're NED, uh, how to deal with something that we have coined, you and I have coined as, we when people are dealing with cancer, they're dealing with cancer of the body. But there is also cancer of the mind. So I'm going to give you the floor for that, and talk more about it and what we feel it exactly is. And then everybody could chime in and give their thoughts as well.
Yeah. And I love this question, Mark. And you and I had like a really long conversation about this, and I've thought about it ever since. So much there is such a connection, the mind body connection, the mind gut connection. And I think that our illnesses actually start in our mind. It's how we're taking in information, the information that we're taking in, what we're already programmed, or whatever, however we're set up within our brain chemistry to believe. And our brain is constantly giving signals to our body on what comes next. And I think so much of our healing actually takes place in our mind first. I think so much of how we survive cancer is how we're thinking about it. Of course, there's medicine that goes into that. There's all kinds of things that factor into it. But I think so much of it starts with how we receive that diagnosis. Do we receive it as, I'm just dead? Do we receive it as, okay, this is an opportunity for my body to function better? um, what do we need to change within our own brains to be able to navigate our daily lives so that our body actually functions the way that it's supposed to function. And probably some of the books I've read, you've read too, but there's wonderful, amazing books out there that really talk about the connection between our mind and our body, and the findings are astronomical. So yeah, so those are some of my very 30,000 foot level thoughts about it. And we can get as deep into this as you want to, but that's really just kind of my overall what I believe, just at my core.
And we're going to keep digging deeper, because I think this is really, really important for everyone. We, as cancer patients, we go through this journey, and we're so focused on the body and dealing with the body and curing the body and everything like that. But as this process goes along and grows, how is our mind being cured? I think a lot of people just assume, oh, just because my body's getting better, my mind's going to be getting better too. But that's not necessarily the case at all, because I think the mind is totally separate in most cases from the body, even though there's a great connection to it. And I think one of the most important things is we have to mend our minds in order to keep moving forward and living a full life. So many
Yeah.
people, I meet people every single day. I met an absolutely amazing woman last night, and it was one of the hardest connections I've ever had to do because I met her on LinkedIn, and she no-showed me on our first call, and then but I knew there was something there. I knew there was something there, and so what happened was we set up a second call, and she no-showed again. At least so I thought. And she said, and I looked and I had her phone number and I reached out to her on LinkedIn and I said, are you going to be getting on the call? And she says, I'm trying, but I'm on a train. And I'm like, okay. So what I did was I created another Zoom link. I sent it to her and she actually got on the call. Um, which I thought was amazing because she was actually on a train. It was dark and everything like that, and it turned out to be one of the most incredible engagements that I've had since I've gotten cancer, since I've started reaching out to people. I mean, this woman, uh, we're going to be doing some interviews with her. She's got amazing connections. In fact, she and I have had many things about our lives have been parallel. We were both born in California, and it turns out, ironically, that lived she lived literally a minute away from my childhood home. I said, what street were you on? And she said, oh, I'm at this intersection, and this intersection. I said, are you kidding me? She said, no, no. And she said, I said, and I told her where I live, and she just stopped dead in her tracks. So to make the conversation even more interesting, I moved from my childhood home to the valley, and she moved. I don't know what the timeline was, but she moved, and she was once again 10 minutes away from me in the valley. And so I was telling her that I had moved to Texas. And she says, are you kidding me? She says, I'm in Texas myself right now. And so our lives have been parallel. She's a brain cancer survivor, just absolutely unbelievable. And the most beautiful, beautiful attitude. And she's all about helping people with cancer, and she's very spiritual. I mean, we got along amazingly, and I just love the conversation. But getting back to our conversation here, uh, I think that's one of the most important things that we as cancer patients need to overcome is the mental trauma of the experience. And so let's talk more about that. And we're going to open it up to the group. If anybody has, any thoughts on this, Teona, what are your thoughts about moving forward mentally once gotten a pronunciation of remission or NED? How does that happen, and what happened in that situation with you personally?
I think that the we all strive for the NED, no evidence of disease. Sometimes we stay stuck. Um, we talk about scanxiety, or like the anxiety that comes with getting a scan. And I think part of that is we're still living in the moment when we got the diagnosis. I had a very PTSD response to the building where I got diagnosed at. And every time I went into that building, I would physically get sick and I would be like, I would start sweating. And it took a friend of mine saying, I couldn't figure it out. I never made the connection that that was the building where I was when I first found out that I had cancer. So when I was going back to get my scans every couple of months, I was just having this complete physical response. And there's a saying that, the body remembers even when the mind doesn't remember. We have these responses, but I think that the mind actually does remember. We're just not aware of it. And for me, I was still stuck in my diagnosis even when I was NED. I was NED within the year. They did 6 months of chemo and then they did surgery and then 6 more months of chemo, right? So I had a full-on NED diagnosis and have continued to have that, but for years, every time I'd go get my scan, even when the time got further and further away, I was still physically sick, thinking about, you know, I had cancer before. So I'm probably just going to end up with it again. And the statistics and all of the things don't play I mean, like they do a number on us, right? It's great to be informed. It's great to have the information, but we also have to remember that those statistics are not us. They're about the thing that we have, right? They're not about our body chemistry. They're not about how we are perceiving the diagnosis. It's their numbers, and they're very important numbers, but it's also not our number, right? That those statistics represent. So I think when we're trying to push past the diagnosis and the statistics and everything that comes along with it, we have to get back to ourselves. Who are we? What is our body trying to tell us? And Mark, you and I didn't talk about this, but I think that's really important too, is when we do develop cancer, I think that that is our body communicating with us. And it had been communicating all along. We just didn't get the urgency of the message until we got a diagnosis of some sort or a symptom that was problematic enough to send us to a doctor. So I think our mindset around how we receive the information and how we live it out from that point forward is critical, not only in our body healing, but in us being able to be more than that diagnosis living inside of our body. I think we're so programmed in some ways to be very fearful and rightfully so of cancer, but I think that our bodies are remarkable in knowing what to do when we let our bodies do it and we set it up for success.
I think so many people mentally become slaves and are imprisoned by their cancer.
Yeah.
And so once in order to fully experience true remission, true NED, aside from the body, I think the mind needs to heal as well. And that's never, I don't think, hardly ever discussed. And so it's, something that we need to share the message about this. We need to make sure people can, deal with the trauma and all the things that come with dealing with cancer and be able to move on and live their lives.
Yeah. It's like you know, our our mindset about cancer, and I do believe you asked this question earlier, is it changing? Yes, I think mindsets about cancer vastly and in the bigger group discussion is changing. But what is not changing is how cancer is presented in terms of, is this just, a physical ailment? Is this happening in our brains? And I recommend to everybody, get a therapist when you get diagnosed. I am big on therapy because the better we can handle this emotionally and mentally, I think that sets us up for success too. But once we come out of cancer, one of the things that I remember happening was if my pinky would hurt, like our running joke was like, oh my God, mom has pinky cancer now. Her pinky's hurting, right? And it was like a little bit of a joke in our family, but I was laughing on the outside, but I was going, okay, but is it? Is it cancer? Has it come back? That is a constant. Even now, I think I'm, 10 years down, I don't think about it as much. But there are times where that little thing goes wrong and I'm thinking, I didn't catch it before. And I have to remember, I'm older, wiser, I know more, I know what to look for. But I think our fear a lot of time is what keeps us in that mental emotional prison, because either we don't know enough about our bodies, we don't know enough about our diagnosis. There's a multitude of things that can happen. So it's normal and natural to be fearful, right? So I think we're part of the work then when we're, going through this journey or we're talking to doctors. And I'm fortunate that I do get to sit on some panels and talk to doctors and they say, okay, what does the medical community need to know about cancer patients? And one of the things that I say often is we're not doctors. Like, we don't know all of the information that you know. So it's really hard to advocate for ourselves. But if doctors can be compassionate and kind and considerate, which many of them are, I think that really helps us when we're patients. And
And
again,
many
going
aren't.
back to that, having a therapist, you know what I mean? Helps us. Yeah.
I was dealing with a gentleman um, who's a friend, a co, no, an employee of a good friend of mine, and he's been dealing um, with his own issues. He's actually a member of this community. He's been dealing with cancer reoccurring and diabetes and things like that, and being overweight. So one of the things that he was telling me was that he was frightful about his latest blood test and everything like that. I think that we so many people become slaves to their cancer, slaves to their numbers, slave to what their doctor says. And what their doctor says is important, yes. And he's got information at his hands with the testing and everything like that. But you cannot make that your total focus. You cannot live your life just by your cancer numbers and by what's happening as far as that goes. Otherwise, what kind of life do you really have if you're a slave to your cancer and your numbers? You know, Granted, I believe that cancer needs to be dealt with every day, particularly when you're an active cancer patient. But at the same time, you've got to be able to separate your cancer situation from your personal life also, and be able to go in and out of that situation and deal with the reality of what you have, and not let yourself and your mind become a slave to this disease. And so I want to open it up. Georges, would you like to chime in? Because I know you've got some thoughts on this.
Sure. Hi, everyone. And Tiana, I'm sorry that I didn't listen to your talk, but just by the comments now and your conversation with Mark, I can see why you're a survivor. I'm a survivor as well of an advanced melanoma with 8 brain tumors and metastasis, 2 of them non-operable. And what I do today, before I was in technology, a CTO, but I made a leap of faith, a couple of them. One of them was going natural on year 8. I had 10 surgeries on me, 4 in the brain and gamma knives, and then the other 2 went away, you may say, with a mental set, but it's really with faith. We didn't talk about that, but for me, it was a key component. But what I do today as a holistic health coach is the first thing I do is work on the emotional clutter and the mental clutter. when I gave my best-selling book to my oncologist, which, by the way, he agreed for me to stop treatments and go natural. That's what I did on year 8, broke. But he understood, and he said, I said, doctor, the only thing is I appreciate if you continue to do follow-ups for me, at least for a year. And he said, yeah, and if whatever you're doing is not gonna work out, maybe something else came in. Two things that you mentioned. One was the statistics. We're not. That's, like you said, perfectly done. I actually talk about that in my book. The other thing is really when you mention we're not doctors, they don't know everything. I have to say this. I mean, I've been shut down in several places. They don't. They're not nutritionists. They're not psychologists. They're not acupuncturists. They're not. They're just not. And so you need to people need to go outside of the box, like Einstein said. You got this problem, you got to get out of that box. And that's what kind of like we were talking, what you guys were talking about now the fact that you mentioned this mental situation. You have pancreas cancer? Pancreas? Okay. Yeah. So pancreas and melanoma, they're there head to head in terms of the toughest one. So I congratulate you. And but the thing is with the mind is that unfortunately we're not trained to deal with this type of stuff. Which is in the West, the mind is we just follow the train, the electric escalator, and we're part of the mainstream. And then you get a cancer, and we just go to one place. We don't know anything else, and so it is easy to say, but it's very hard. After you go through the emotional roller coaster with the diagnosis, as we went. At least us three and Carrie. I'm not sure the other Carrie, but thank God Ligia hasn't gone through that, and I'm sure she won't because she's learning so many things. But the thing is, what I like the most for you, I've been doing holistic health coaching for 10 years, just focusing on people with cancer. But as the last few years, when I look at the state of health of the U.S., particularly, the sickest country of the first world, and more than 60% of our nation has 1 to 3 chronic diseases. So I love what you say. You stop the advocacy. There will not be a cure by pharma. They don't want that to happen. I had an amazing discussion with this guy yesterday. When you are open to see miracles every day, you find people that you say, my goodness, sent from above. And I believe 100% of what you're saying. I'm making a shift. I'm not going to stop helping people with cancer. That will be my main coaching one-on-one thing. But everything else is really attacking the fact that we need to stop this disease machine. And it's many things. It's dieting, it's stress, it's what you're saying, is what got us sick. It's really usually emotional, and because we are walking acidic beings. We need to balance ourselves. And so that's really my shift in the last 6 weeks is, hey, wait a minute. If I'm I do speaking, I'm inviting to, just as a holistic health coach and nutritionist, hypnotherapist. I did a bunch of stuff just to help my clients. And so when I ask, who here is, has cancer, if I do, if it comes to, it's a time to ask 1 or 2 people. But if I ask who here would like to avoid the disease, you get the rest, the 98%. So that tells you everything. Where can I be more effective? Preventing or helping 1 to 3 people one-on-one? And so So I wish I know that this is going to be recorded. I would like to, you know, the good thing about this community is that we all are hard-minded people, all of us, but we do have something additional to that, and this is mental power. When I went and gave my best-selling book to my oncologist, I haven't seen him in 4 years. Everybody pushing me, hey, go get a scan. I'm free of cancer. Why should I go? That's done. That's part of my life. It happened for me to grow, and I wish I knew that in the beginning because having 5 young children. But the bottom line here is, just teaching people how to get out of this mainstream, holistic, mainstream health situation. I would say mainstream get sick situation. It almost is like there's an agenda for us to get sick so they can sell us the drugs. Can you imagine, see it today, even in cable TV, they have commercials now, one or two or three. One of three commercials is a drug. And they say very fast, 70% of the commercial is, this could kill you, this is the doctor, your doctor, like your doctor knows everything. So I had 10 surgeries. If it wasn't for that and 4 craniotomies, I'd not be here. I have nothing against the advancements of, robotics and stuff that they do, amazing neurosurgeons and all this stuff, breast, specialties. But what I'm not really fond of, and I found it the hard way, is business this business of the oncology, the chemo and this and that, and it doesn't work for everybody. And then later on, and 4 years later, they tell you, or even if it's diabetes, for example, we have an experience that somebody shared not too long ago, but the fact is that you mentioned it today. We do have the capacity we got ourselves sick and we have the capacity, but not everybody has the mental capacity, unfortunately, to actually reverse that, because the body is telling us something. You're going too fast, you're doing this, you're a type A personality, you want to do it all, and you don't take time for yourself. There's many messages in there. And but the fact is that once you get sick, like Mark was saying, many people, and I thank God that I didn't do that, maybe it was my background, but many people become slaves of this, and they live in this fear, and they become let's say, a subordinate of, the doctor becomes their God. The doctor said, and then you do only what the doctor is telling you. That's my 2 cents, but I'm gonna listen to your recording, because very interesting conversation there. We are very similar. I think also all survivors, Carrie, all of us are very similar. We have something in common, because how many people passed away from pancreatic cancer or from melanoma, malignant melanoma? Just those two types of cancer. But you and I are here. Mark is here, Carrie's here. Carrie Darling may be here, and Ligia is the one that now is picking up and says, man, I gotta take care of myself. I want to avoid this, and she's a healthy woman. So thank you. Yeah.
That's awesome, George. And thank you for sharing that, because you're right about you know, there are a lot of, and I don't know if you know this or not, one of my friends who actually succumbed to pancreatic cancer, it was very interesting because he had pancreatic, his sister had breast cancer, and his uncle had a melanoma. And what they found is those three genes just show up differently in different people. Same gene, disruption shows up differently in each people. So there's interestingly enough, there's another connection there that you may not have known as, you know what I mean, known as much about. But I really appreciate the thought of holistic health, because I think that that plays a role in patient outcomes on a bigger scale than is often talked about.
I have to share something. When I took two books when I was going to do my, after 4 years, my PET scan. I took a book and dedicated it to my doctor in Sylvester Cancer Center in Miami, Florida, and to Christina, his assistant. And but when they saw me, they just, it was like, wow, you look so good. Because even them, then they're just doing something and I don't know, they're just trying. I don't blame them. But Christina said something that it really got my attention. She said, George, the moment you walked through your first appointment, I knew you had a chance. You know why? Because your mental attitude. And one thing that I did, and I mean, it's something that I know that helped me a lot. I would avoid waiting for my appointment in the room where there were caregivers and the fear of everybody sitting there. That energy, I just wanted to avoid it. It was my protection mechanism. So I used to tell Christina, I'm gonna be in the garden downstairs. Just beat me, because they have beepers at that time. And I'll go up. So I avoided any fear, even from people that don't want to scare you, but they are scared. Family. Oh, how are you doing, Teona? Are you okay? Have faith, have faith, and all this stuff. And people, oh yeah, there's George. He has cancer. He's in that corner. I had to protect myself with meditation and so one of the things that I teach is nourish yourself. Start the day taking care of yourself first. Our time is not renewable. And if you don't nourish yourself, breathe and just relax. And then your energy level when you leave the house is amazing. But nobody does that. And very few people. 66% of the United States don't do that. And, carriers in Canada, they have similar numbers, but they have a smaller population. But percentage-wise, it's the same thing around the world, really. Yeah.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step in we're going to finish the recording right now. So what I want to do is thank everybody who participated, and especially thank Teona Ducre for sharing her journey and her knowledge. It's been absolutely fantastic. And we hope that this conversation has sparked uh, interest, not only interest, but also food for thought, and hopefully courses of action for anybody who is in need of what we are talking about. I'd want to thank everyone for joining us here at the Cancer Conquering Community. I hope everybody has an absolutely fantastic week, and we will see you next week at the Cancer Conquering Community. Thank you so much.